Well, hello and welcome back to Pastors on Porn. This is the podcast where we discuss issues related to people in ministry who are struggling with unmanageable sexual behaviors such as porn, talking about just some of the challenges of living in this fallen world, being broken people, and also people who find ourselves trying to be faithful and true to the call of God in our lives and leading other people in local churches. So again, it's been a while since my last confession. I like to put it that way. Keeps you on your toes, keeps me on my toes. But today I want to talk about just a get-together I had with a group of friends. Hadn't seen them for a number of years. And you know how it is when you're with a group of friends and you kind of catch up and you hear about where everyone's been the last few years. And this was kind of the beginning of the summer get together. And so we were kind of catching up, and one of my friends just shared about their daughter, who has been a dear friend of mine as well, and just shared how, they had been going through a marriage breakup, and that the husband in this situation had gone on a walkabout. That's Australian for leaving home, I think, and essentially had taken up with another woman. I think he was in his 40s, and there was a couple teenage girls involved, and all of the fallout from that. And my heart just broke hearing their story, because I was close to them. I cared for them, and I still care for them. And just to hear how their marriage has gone sideways, and just a story that we hear over and over again. And then just all of the ripples that a marriage breakup has on a family, the nuclear family, has on the extended family, has on friends. And it just broke my heart to hear their story. And so I guess one of the reasons is, first of all, I am the product of a divorce. My mom and dad split. My dad had a major midlife crisis. He wasn't a believer, but my mom was. And he basically moved into his 40s and then began a series of affairs and began to live a completely opposite life to the father that I had known growing up. And, and just dealing with that, at the time, I wouldn't tell you that it had a lot of effects on me. I was pretty out of touch with my feelings. I was pretty steeped in porn and hiding away already at that point. But, it brought back a lot of memories. It reminded me of a song that Jason Gray had written about a divorce. And the song he wrote was called Death Without a Funeral. And some of the lyrics that he has here are, "There's no stone to lay the flower down beside, no mention in the paper, though something clearly died. No gathering for family and friends eulogize, it's a death without a funeral. There's no book to sign for people filing in, no table full of pictures where they say remember when. No song is sung about how all good things come to an end, it's a death without a funeral. When you see me, I'm still breathing, though a million things have died inside of me, but there's no healing without grieving. No wonder why it's hard to rest in peace. When there's nothing we can bury in the dirt, no place to lay the memory of all things that were, no way to feel the closure, no ending to the hurt, it's a death without a funeral." I think he wrote that about his own situation. I saw a short interview with Jason Gray on the internet. But, it's, and again, I don't know how that relationship, where things are going to go from here. But again, it just broke my heart having another more dear friends of mine, because of a number of factors, including sexual factors, marriage break apart. Now, I don't know the whole backstory, and I'm not really here to speculate as to the backstory. And let me also just say, if you have been sticking with me through these podcasts, you know that I am clearly no saint. You know that I've struggled for a better part of my life with porn, with unmanageable sexual behaviors, and in ministry as well, not being squeaky clean and trying to stay faithful to God and the call of God, yet feeling this brokenness that wells up inside of me. And with God's grace, that's turned a corner in these last number of years. But I get it. I get what a midlife crisis can do. I get what's like when you lose your bearings. I get what it's like. I just had our 37th wedding anniversary. I get what it's like to lose momentum in your marriage, right? So here's kind of one of the things, though, that I am noticing, and I want to just muse a bit about some of the factors that I see playing out in different situations. And again, you forgive me if I make this too tight of a model. It's not my intent. But here is one of the things that I see happening with Christian marriages. Again, I just am drawing lines. Sometimes maybe they're too direct or too straight. But we have been through a significant season of deconstruction in people's lives. COVID has deconstructed some things. People have been deconstructing their faith. Many in most of our churches are nowhere near as strong or as large as they were previous to COVID. Your church might be an exception, but I know in Canada, most churches, I would say, are maybe 50 to 60% of where things were before COVID. And it kind of makes you wonder, well, where did everybody go? One of the things that it revealed to me that there was a lot more nominal faith in our churches than we cared to believe. I always I was raised as an evangelical kid, so I always associated nominal Christians with, those mainline churches, or, churches where you go to confession, or churches where you go Easter and Christmas. Or I even grew up and one of my buddies went to a church. They closed down for the summer, and I'm going, what kind of a church is that? Huh? Nominal. Oh, they're just nominal Christians. They're not really true Christians, right? And yet I think, for example, that coming out of COVID has really revealed that when it came to true, authentic, corporate, relational Christianity, many people were nominal in our churches across the evangelical spectrum. They were nominal. Church was a service. And then they realized, you know what? I can experience church online. I can experience church, less and less. And, once they had essentially been away from church for months and months because of COVID, they go, you know what? I think I'm okay without it. And I can get a little bit of, maybe I'll watch The Chosen or no shot of The Chosen. Maybe I can listen to some worship, whatever. I can have my relationship with God kind of on my own terms. And, I think I'm just fine, and I can think of lots of better things to do on a Sunday. Thank you very much. And so that might be a charitable or a not so charitable take on the state of the depth of much that passes for Jesus followers in particular North America. But there's also another aspect, and I've had many long conversations. I know I've done sermons on it. People who are deconstructing their faith at a far more substantive level. People that are saying, you know what, I grew up in these constructs. I grew up in this way of thinking, and I essentially no longer see myself as some people call them ex-evangelicals, or I might not even see myself as a Christian anymore. I now maybe just would like to see myself as spiritual, or I don't believe in the major tenets of what I was taught growing up. And, most of us would look maybe at the generation that follows us, our kids and our nephews and nieces, and we would see that played out. A lot of people would say, you know what, Christianity doesn't really, I don't either buy it or believe it, or it's certainly not functional for me. But you don't even have to look to the next generation. Many, many people in our generation, our friends, we would say, you know what, I just don't think I buy it anymore. I don't buy the major tenets of what, churches would say or sort of the key essentials to orthodoxy. So, okay. I think if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, your head's in the sand and you haven't been talking to people, or you are living in a commune somewhere and haven't discovered the internet yet, or I don't know what it is, but then you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. So, but here's where I take that whole deconstruction impulse at one level, and then I take some of the things that I see going on around marriages, and I want to draw a linkage to it. I have noticed that when people begin to deconstruct their faith, they also begin to deconstruct their life, and or they begin to deconstruct their sexuality. Now you might, and sometimes it could be the other way around. You know what? I'm tired of the constraints of being in this unhappy relationship, and there's a better version of a woman, of a partner out there I think I'd like to go, or I'm tired, whatever that is. I'm not sure which comes first, but I'm convinced that there is a close linkage between deconstructing our faith, the church community that we are embedded with or not embedded with, and the constraints and security around our sexuality. I mean, oftentimes what happens is it starts maybe with deconstructing around what we believe. And or then we begin to remove ourselves or distance ourselves from Christian brothers and sisters who maybe are still holding to those things that we are questioning or walking away at. Now, again, I have no problem with good, healthy doubt, and I think it's a really healthy thing. And there's things in my faith that I've come to doubt and change my opinions on, which I think are good and healthy. One of them is my view around God. God doesn't turn his back on me when I sin. God is always calling me and embracing me. That just would be an example. I was raised that God can't look on sin. And, if I'm in a movie theater when the rapture happens, I'm toast. Those are good things that, or I'll be left behind. Those are good things that I think are good to deconstruct. I've done a whole sermon on deconstruction. If you're curious, you can email me at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com and I'll send it to you. All I'm saying is that I have noticed in many situations, and I don't know which comes first, but I know the package often is we no longer believe what we used to theologically, and or we no longer worship with the people that we used to corporately, and we no longer believe and behave the way we were raised or way we grew up sexually. Those things for me, I see linked together. I mean, I've had people tell me, I'm deconstructing my faith. And I go, well, and then they'll tell me, hey, I also have this other relationship. My wife doesn't know about it, but I have this other relationship with this other person my wife doesn't know about. But that's okay. I've had people who have walked away from their faith, who've told me that they're exploring polyamory, where they're looking at maybe trading their partners or having multiple partners. And you're going, what? Romans 1 is all about when we throw off our beliefs, we also find that our sexuality becomes also up for debate, up for grabs. We reinvent what we believe. We reinvent who we are with and who we are journeying with, and we also reinvent what we believe regarding our sexuality. And I see those things so linked. So the first one is here's an example. I see when people begin to distance themselves from a local church, for example, I just start having all sorts of warning signs, and I'm not even sure how to have these conversations. It's interesting if you read, I have the NIV Study Bible, and I was always struck, sometimes it's always fun to go to the bottom and read some of the notes. 1 Corinthians 5:5, where you have this person who is now having a illicit sexual relationship with, I think it's their stepmother or whatever, and they're causing a scandal, in the church. And Paul is essentially saying, you know what? Hand this person over to Satan for the destruction of their flesh so their spirit may be saved. And I'm going, well, what the heck does that mean? And then you read, for example, underneath it, the church was considered a sanctuary from Satan's power. The church was considered a sanctuary from Satan's power. You have Paul talking in 1 Timothy 1:20 about Hymenaeus and Alexander, who he's put out of the church and handed over to Satan. And then you have underneath it the note that says to be put out of the church is to now be left in the devil's territory, severed from any connection with God's people. And you go, okay, now we're not talking about people who are being put out. We're talking about people who are voluntarily walking away from their source of protection. They're, walking away from God's territory into the enemy territory. It reminds me of this book, Call of the Wild. Filmed up north. I forget if it was Alaska or the Yukon. I think it was the Yukon. But in the story, you have the fire, and you have, I might get the story all wrong, but work with me in terms of this word picture. So in the story, you have they're out in the middle of the wilderness, and they have this fire, and and he has his dogs, and he's keeping them close, and all around the fire, you have these wolves that are howling. And in one sense, trying to lure the dogs out away from the fire. And as long as they stay close to the fire, they're safe and protected. Now, all of that sounds like fear mongering. If I said to a couple who's deconstructing their faith and no longer see a value for church, and I said to them, do you realize you're going into Satan's territory? Do you realize you're leaving the fire? Do you realize that you are open prey to the enemy? I think they would look at me like I was from the 1800s and say, boy, you're just, fear-mongering and piling guilt on us. And, we're not going to respond to that kind of thing. But I tell you, I see this over and over and over again. People deconstructing a lot more than their faith. They deconstruct their church community, and they deconstruct their sexuality. And all hell breaks loose at times, and you go, what happened? So, my heart does break, and I'm just going, I don't know how to respond when I see people who are leaving the fire. There's honest doubts. There's honest questions. We should be in a church where we can talk about those things. But I guess I'm going, man, and I know I'm speaking to people who are leading and pastoring in churches and all of that. We need to build a strong fire. We need to allow people to express their doubts. The last verse that talks about, 1 Timothy 6:10 talks about people who wandered away from the faith. That might be a better picture, because people are not being pushed away or kicked out from the fire. People are just wandering away from the fire and wandering away from the faith. And it says they've pierced themselves with many griefs. Now, the context of that was around materialism, but I think it holds at the broadest level. How many of us, our friends, our family members, are finding themselves pierced with many griefs? And so my heart does break. I'm just going, I do my best to have a role to bring people back to the fire. Not, and as a broken vessel myself, I get it. I've struggled in the church. Church I have met some of the most ignorant people in the world in the church. I've had people try to convince me the earth is flat who are Christians. I mean, I've heard the craziest thing from Christians. But then I've also, but then outside the church, I hear some pretty crazy things as well. You don't find, church is not perfect, but it's a fire. And I guess I'm hoping, just in sharing that, maybe it gives us some tools for thought. If you were thinking, you know what, I can give or not, I can go or not go, or give or take church or my beliefs, I would just say, I'm not sure. Not so fast. If you're walking away from all of those things and you think your life is going to remain its stability and strength, I don't know. I believe there are forces. I believe that we live in a contested world. And so maybe if nothing else, you in your conversations with people, you can say, you know what, this is a lot bigger than just you deciding that, that you're not, that you can take, give or take the things that you've grown up with that deep in your heart are right. And anyways, just some thoughts. Again, hopefully we can, there's a great blessing for those who can call people back, who can restore the wanderers. And I'm just praying that you would find that grace to be able to help people, either as they begin to wander or once they've wandered, to pull them back, because deep down we're all wanderers that need the grace of God. We'll see you next time.